Stuart, Mr. Syvret, your blog's been taken down by Google. What was the first how did you first discover this, and when did you first discover your blog was suspended?
Well, I received an email from Google only 2 or 3 days before the blog was suspended and effectively taken down. They didn't give me any longer notice. They didn't attempt to discuss the situation with me. They simply emailed me, one of these automated kind of emails, and they listed about 31 separate postings on my blog which they wanted taken down. They used some interesting terminology in their communications, actually. They suggested that the material on the blog was allegedly defamatory. Now, of course, this is a very curious set of words for them to use, because there has been no single defamation action even attempted against my blog, let alone actually brought or agreed by a court of law. So there is simply no defamation action, even on the radar screen, at all. So this raises questions about, in fact, what Google have been told. Clearly, Google have received a great deal of misleading and false information from the Jersey authorities. Interestingly, there was a letter attached to the email which Google had received from the Jersey authorities. And it's a very interesting document, and there are some frankly staggering revelations in that letter. I imagine that the Jersey authorities will be deeply angered that the letter was disclosed to me, because it reveals, in fact, that contrary to the claims by the Jersey authorities and the Data Protection Commissioner, that all of this action, this long-standing action against the publication of public interest material on my blog, which they claim began only in March 2009. In fact, the letter disclosed by Google shows that the Jersey authorities were actually trying to get my blog shut down, the entire URL removed from the internet, from at least November 2008. Clearly, this coincides with the illegal suspension of Police Chief Graham Power. At that time, the mainstream media in Jersey and indeed elsewhere simply swallowed whole the Jersey government's spin about the suspension of Police Chief Power, and they just assumed that it was a justified thing. There was only one public outlet, one source of news, that was actually challenging the suspension of the police chief and saying, hold on a minute, this looks really wrong. This needs a lot of detailed explanation. What is the truth here? What are the facts? A lot of serious questions arise out of this matter. And that single news source that was challenging the suspension of the police chief was only my blog. And the Jersey government, basically, and the Jersey Data Protection Commissioner were clearly covertly trying to get my blog removed from the internet from at least that time. The Jersey authorities claim that I've broken the data protection law. I haven't broken the data protection law. The data protection law says quite clearly you can publish information when it's in the public interest. You can publish evidence and facts that show crime, that show wrongdoing, and show that corruption has been covered up. You know, if you weren't allowed to do that kind of thing, of course, actually journalism would be illegal. And it isn't illegal in the West. So the claims that the politicised and directly conflicted little coterie of so-called judges in Jersey make against me is clearly nonsense. So it has no validity in law at all. Journalism is lawful. It's a good thing. We're allowed to do it in the West. The rulings of Jersey's court are an irrelevance. But even taken on their own terms, the nonsense that comes out of Jersey's excuse for a court hasn't been a defamation action. No. None of these people have ever filed or claimed a defamation action against me. So there is no issue of defamation. So when Google say this material is allegedly defamatory, well, they've clearly been lied to by Jersey's conflicted authorities.
How much would you say, since they've been trying to close your blog down since 2008, what sort of money are we talking about here? How much of the taxpayers' money's been spent on trying to silence you with Google?
Well, certainly I'm aware so far of claims that are approaching £400,000. And that, I think, is probably not the real figure. I mean, clearly the Jersey establishment have had all kinds of other parts of the public sector working on this. They've no doubt had the Chief Minister's spin doctors department engaged in this for some years. They will have had a variety of private sector lawyers working on it. They've clearly had the data protection department working full time on this. They've no doubt had a number of internal officers of the judicial grefg and the law officers department working on this. Probably were you to compile the whole cost of attempting to silence me and to stop us criticising Jersey's government, it could easily run into £2 or £3 million. The material in question will go up again on the internet and again, and other people will put it up. So it's going to be hosted by other people. So there is no way that the Jersey authorities can ultimately succeed in keeping this material off of the internet. So we've got into a situation where basically they're on a path now where they're oppressing opposition activists, they're oppressing independent journalism, they're oppressing whistleblowers, they've mobilised corruptly the entire apparatus of the state to engage in basically the state-sponsored oppression of people who are trying to expose corruption, cover-ups and crimes. Now, it's the kind of misadventure that can only end one way. I mean, governments can't act like this and retain their credibility. This can only end one way. And so, yes, you're quite right. It's been an act of folly from that sense.
And you said there about the costs and everything. Aren't you, at the minute, you're being chased for some court costs or something, aren't you?
Yes, well, they are attempting to recover from me. For some reason, they've decided to resurrect the supposed costs of prosecuting me under the data protection law, and indeed the cost that was incurred to me having the nerve to appeal that judgment. And they've summoned me to court this Friday, in fact, where they're going to attempt to get this debt of about £70,000 enforced against me. Now, this clearly is going to be the start of the same kind of bankruptcy proceedings that they've used against deputies Schoner and Trevor Pittman. Now, clearly what they want to do is to make it impossible for me to be a candidate in the Jersey general election later this year. And indeed, it's very, very interesting that this supposed bill for them having prosecuted me, a prosecution decided by the directly conflicted Attorney General of the day, William Balash, I've got to supposedly now pay for this. And it's interesting that this debt comes from a couple of years ago now. But it was only resurrected and put to me very recently. 2 enforcement officers came banging on my door one morning, the day after the seats of deputies Schoner and Trevor Pittman had been declared vacant. Clearly the Jersey establishment were worried that there was a possibility I might be a candidate in one of the 2 by-elections. So immediately they began this debt from the past, they sought to resurrect it and begun proceedings to have it enforced upon me. So they were going to stop me basically from being an effective candidate in these by-elections, and they want to do the same to stop me in case I was going to be a candidate in the general election later this year. And again, this is another example of the kind of thing that corrupt regimes around the world do. They use these pseudo-toxic, fake legal procedures to basically stop their political opponents from competing against them in elections.
Well, I don't know if there's been a revelation there or not. I suppose I've got to ask, are you going to stand, or are you thinking of standing in the next general election?
Well, it's a possibility, isn't it? I mean, a number of people have asked me, a number of people did ask me, in fact, to run in one of the by-elections that are taking place at the moment. Indeed, in fact, Deputy Trevor Pittman himself asked me if I would be a candidate, and a number of other people did as well, and I thought about it. But one of the factors that I knew would make it effectively impossible for me to be an effective candidate was this impending debt recovery action that the establishment just decided to launch against me. A number of people asked me to try and get back into politics. People always ask me to contest the elections again. This is Jersey's general election year. Would I be a candidate in it? Possibly, yes. But the difficulty, of course, is that if I get these ludicrous debts enforced against me by the oligarchy for having tried to expose their cover-ups in the past, well then legally I wouldn't be able to be a candidate.
Because they'll bankrupt you as well.
Sure.
Your blog, or the contents of your blog, is going to be hosted across the internet.
Sure.
Can you tell us when we might see this happening?
It's going to happen in the coming days. I mean, I'm in discussion with a number of people, not only in Jersey, but other activists and supporters all around the world now. This is a kind of network where we've got global support. I've got different people with different IT expertise, different political activists, different organisations I'm in discussions with. So yes, one way or another, the material on my blog is going to be put up on the World Wide Web. And let's be clear about the kind of material it is. There is material on my blog that utterly shames the lame excuse for all of Jersey's mainstream media. And people like
not only your blog, just about every other blog, to be honest.
People like me and you and Rico Sorda and other bloggers, we've done more investigative journalism, more evidence-based journalism, and we've published more revelatory public interest facts in the last few years than all of Jersey's mainstream media has done combined, say, in all of the post-World War II years. And this is a terrifying and shocking thing to the Jersey oligarchy, our feudal mafia. It's a culture shock to them, like corrupt regimes around the world have had. They just don't know how to deal with this. They just don't know how to stop the flow of information. Their very carefully manufactured image, their narrative, suddenly is no longer credible because people can look at the evidence. And the kind of material I've had published on my blog, and it's important public interest stuff, it's a matter of public record. We're talking evidence of decades of cover-ups of all kinds in the public sector, evidence of corruption, evidence of concealed child abuse, evidence of civil servants colluding to try and cover up their past failures, actual affidavits. I've got affidavits, sworn testimony from actual Deputy Police Chief, former Police Chief Lenny Harper, and sworn testimony, an affidavit from the former Police Chief Graham Power on my blog. Now this is serious, evidenced, revelatory, journalistic dynamite of the kind that you would find nowhere in any of Jersey's traditional mainstream media. So my blog is no trivial thing. It's an absolutely historic archive of the truth and the evidence about the kind of cover-ups that the Jersey government have been engaging in. But it's actually more important than that, and I know this from a lot of the contacts I've had in recent days. My blog in many ways became the first ever outlet for the victims of all kinds of crime in Jersey. Particularly, I suppose we're talking here about victims of child abuse, victims of the child abuse concealments. And my blog was the first outlet to really publish the evidence. And it gave these victims of abuse, these survivors, a voice for the first time. And the evidence I published validated their experiences. And they were empowered about that. They were given strength about that. So I want them to know, to rest assured, that all of that material that's important to their truth is going back up on the internet. And I'm proud that the blog is attracting this kind of foul and lunatic abuse, these oppressions, these banana republic attempts to silence it. I'm proud that Jersey's sleazy old men, our corrupt, messy collection of old crooks that run this place, I'm proud that these sleazy old men are frightened and terrified of this. I'm proud that my blog has given a voice to the powerless for the first time ever in Jersey's 800-year history.